Hi, Dragon Con. Caro from the BritTrack here. I'm the director, and with me today to talk about traveling to the UK are these wonderful and glorious people. With us, we have Gareth, who is a former BritTrack volunteer and also a YouTuber with his YouTube channel about UK travel called Let's Go. Hi, Gareth. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. We also have with us Anthony from Watchers of the Fourth Dimension, which is a wonderful podcast and can be found at watchers4d.podbean.com. How are you doing today, Anthony? Good?
Hey, Caro, I'm good, thank you. Glad to hear already that you're doing well as well.
Thanks. We also have Trisha Woldridge, who is an author, editor, and poet who likes to use writing research to fund food and travel. You can find out more at anovelfriend.com. How are you doing, Trisha?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me and good to see you all.
Awesome. We also have with us the wonderful and amazing Adam Spring, who's currently traveling, and we're really grateful for him to have his time. He has a wonderful podcast called Remotely Interested Podcast. So you can find him on remotely-interested.com. How are you today, Adam?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, making it through, recording panels for Dragon Con. So we're super excited. So we're here to talk about traveling to the UK. And I know that that's a crazy topic to be talking about right now because of COVID and what's going on with it. But when the time comes, we're going to be having all of our plans set and ready to go in motion after watching this panel and offering our audience different tips and tricks and things to do when you go to the UK. So we're going to start by going through the standard kind of itinerary format of booking your flight, where to stay, what are the essentials to see, what to eat, like you must try when you travel to the UK, and then maybe some advice, especially on visiting like various different like locations of filming for things and that kind of stuff. So let's start off with traveling there from the United States. What is it that you need in order normally to get in to the UK? So let's go ahead and start with Anthony. What do you need?
You need a passport and a flight. So, I like to fly Delta normally or Virgin Atlantic. They do a nice direct route from Atlanta to London Heathrow. So, you know, get to the airport, check in, have a few drinks, get on the flight, have a few more drinks, wake up in London. It's great.
That's totally fair. So one app I found out about is called SkyScanner, and I actually found this out from Gareth, who told me about it. What exactly is SkyScanner?
It's a price comparison app and website. So you just put in you want to go from Atlanta to London, and it will give you prices and airlines. So you can figure out which is the best one. I prefer going direct with the airline because Skyscanner, if you book them, so they're a middleman, so they'll take a cut, and you don't get allocated your seats if you book directly with the airlines. You get your seat preferences and you direct with them. Any issues, you take it with them rather than with Skyscanner. So Skyscanner are a very good price comparison service I would use before booking.
All right, Trisha, when it comes to booking flights, what's your recommendation?
Well, I have a Delta American Express card, so I pretty much use Delta for most of my flying, and I use the points. And since I also go down to Dragon Con every year, Atlanta's a hub, so that's how I usually get as much of my flying as free as possible. So I'll put whatever bills I do on my card, gather up the points, apply it, and I also have a free companion, so I get to bring my husband, my companion, on all my adventures. So that's how I usually do it. And I do like that if people do have business, especially if you run a business and you have a business credit card, airplane points and stuff are really useful. So that's how I normally go to most of my travel. Yeah.
All right, Adam, what about you? What are some, as far as like getting there?
Again, similar to Anthony, it would be Delta or Virgin that I would use, and you can also get a flight into Manchester, and that's what I did the last time that I flew over. In terms of websites to look at, again, just price comparison sites and doing things that way. If I can fly Delta because, you know, live in the Atlanta area and it's a major hub, then I do Delta for the points. But yeah, mainly just look for the good prices, really.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Like one time, I had a friend travel, and when it was easier for them because they were on the West Coast to fly into New York, spend a night in New York, and then take a direct flight from New York to Ireland, and then hop on another plane to get into London. And that was cheaper for them to do all of that. And he ended up saving, I think, about like $800, $900 just by doing that on his trip there, like out there. And then he had a direct flight home. And but he said it was totally worth it because he got to, you know, have a night in Ireland. He had a night in New York, and he never stayed in either, and was able to then spend 2.5 weeks in London and have this nice little trip and visit while he was there. So, you know, it's really all about just seeing what works for your budget and, you know, again, taking advantage of definitely those things like coupons and points and everything you guys have said as far as traveling there. Now, what about staying there? Like, where should you stay? As far as where to stay, where to rest your head, is the Airbnb worth it, or is the hotel chain, you know, the way to go, or even a B&B? So what would be your recommendations? We'll start with Adam. What would you recommend?
I mean, the last time the way we did it was all Airbnb, and would fully recommend that depending on where you are staying in the area. I mean, obviously there's a big difference in, say, staying in London.
We did airport the night we were flying.
Okay, and we did airport. Apparently, so my agent is telling me apparently we did obviously to tell airport the night we were flying as well, flying hotels to go out. Sorry, so staying in a hotel before you fly back out again. So basically, I'd say when you're there, it's very specific in terms of where you're staying. Like I was about to say, you know, staying in Manchester is going to be different than staying in London. You know, London can be quite expensive, and Manchester's maybe not a good example anymore because it's getting very expensive as well. But, you know, try an Airbnb where you can, but look for your deals with the hotels depending on where you're staying as well.
Okay. All right, Gareth, what would you recommend?
Airbnb, I've used that over here. I've used it in the States. I've used it in Poland. I've used it not in Amsterdam because I got a capsule hotel there. I've had no bad experiences with Airbnb as long as you get somebody who's rated really well. Hotels can be expensive. That is a good chunk, especially if you just be visiting London. I'd say, we may go into this later on, but London is divided up into zones which go radiantly out from the centre of London. Stay as far out as you're willing to travel in, but near one of the tube or rail lines. Yeah, there are some good chain hotels, Premier Inn and Travel Lodge. You know what you're getting with them. If you stay with an independent, 50-50. So yeah, Airbnb is ultimately the cheapest way to go. And I feel like when I do that, I'm staying in the country rather than just a hotel. You know, you're actually part of it. You're in someone's house and you get to experience that kind of culture a little bit more, which I enjoy myself.
Okay. Anthony?
So normally, you know, if I'm in London, I'm staying with my parents. So it can't give
Stay
many
with Anthony's
different
parents
trips.
then.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know. I'll see if they'll take you. You know, who knows? But if I'm going outside of London, depends where. If I'm in the countryside, a lot of pubs have rooms. I love staying in a room above a pub, if nothing else, because I can get, you know, I can stumble up there later on in the evening without too much worry. If I'm in a bigger city, I tend to like a hotel or an Airbnb. Had positive experiences with Airbnb across the spectrum. Hotels, they can be iffy depending on your price point. Going for a travel lodge, that could be very hit and miss. If you're going for something like a Hilton, you're normally going to get a good experience, but it's going to obviously cost you a bit more.
Okay. All right, Trisha?
I've had a couple of different experiences, actually. So I was going partly for research. So I specifically wanted to do bed and breakfasts and local small hotels, I did hostels and historical houses when I was visiting. So in London, I was at a historical B&B, and I stayed there. It was for 2 days. Wonderful time. When I was in Edinburgh, I had a hostel over a pub, which was great because they also had washing machines and all of those useful stuff. We were doing a 2-week tour. But also, you reminded me when you mentioned about the flying, Caro, is planning your travel if you're doing a tour of the UK. So if you're doing, like we did both England and Scotland, so we planned to have, and if you do round trip between, it was Heathrow and the Glasgow airport, it was cheaper than Edinburgh. So we planned our directions based on flights around and when renting a car would be cheaper or taking a train would be cheaper. So those all worked into that. One of the things I loved that I will recommend is I stayed in Traquair Castle, which is in Scotland. It's in the southeastern part and the borders, and that's a castle, and it's a castle. You get to stay in there. It's the oldest lived-in residence in the UK, in Scotland specifically. And they have secret rooms. It's where Mary Queen of Scots went to go hide during the Jacobite Wars. So taking the time to look for these really cool historical areas that you can stay in, and they have deals. So they had a special deal where you stayed 3 days, 2 nights. You got a really, really fancy dinner with like this crystal china, and oh my goodness, nice. It was amazing. So when you're looking for lodgings, look at the experience part of it as well. And then when we were in over in Coldingham, Scotland, we stayed in this adorable B&B called Rovanian. They were Tolkien fans, and we just really got to hang out, and they told you, like, okay, so here's where you can go hiking, because we were doing a lot of hiking and looking for ruins. That was awesome because you got the local perspective. It was a B&B, not an Airbnb, so it was a little bit different, and that was absolutely worth it. And then when we were staying in Islay in Scotland, we stayed at Hotel Bowmore, which is right across from the distillery. And that was one of the longest running hotels on Islay, which is this tiny itty bitty little island off of Scotland. And I stayed up in the pub down there late at night, and I got all the gossip on all 14 distilleries on this island. So I knew where to go, who to talk to, who were the most local support. So those are things that you don't get unless you take the time to find these like little, not just like Airbnbs, but like historical areas where people are used to talking to guests and telling you what's going on.
So definitely like going. So like you were saying, like definitely, going and talking to locals and finding out what to see and where to go and what are like these, you got to go and visit this place. This is totally worth it. So let's go around. What are some places that, as far as like things you should actually know about, about London, about England, as well as like where you would recommend that people kind of go and visit and just see, because it's completely worth it in that experience. So let's start with Anthony. What are some places that we should check out?
I was worried you were going to start with me. So I'm a Londoner. Born and raised, lived there until I was 23 before I moved to the US. So most of what I say is going to be pretty London centric. I think you've got to do the usual kind of tourist trek of doing Westminster Abbey, Tower of London, all that kind of thing. But London's a big city with a lot of history, and there are some real hidden gems there. One thing I really recommend is Freemasons Hall in London is actually open for tours to the public during the week. And it is an absolutely stunning building. It's one of the only Art Deco buildings in London that's still in use for its original purpose. You can do a guided tour of that. Absolutely beautiful and stunning. trying to think what else. A lot of the universities have their own kind of museums. I'm a graduate of University College London. They've got a couple of really cool museums, including one of Egyptology that's worth going to. And you know, one of the nice things about England is it's relatively small in comparison to the US. You can do, if you're staying in London, you can do a lot of good day trips and go somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge, places with a huge amount of history that you can that are kind of small enough to see the highlights of in a day. But yeah, in general, I recommend just getting into central London and doing some exploring.
Okay, all right, Adam, what would you recommend?
So, I mean, you know, to sort of support what Anthony was saying, the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is associated with UCL, University College London, and the Freemason Hall, they're both actually really good to do in London because I've actually done both of those before. So that's pretty cool. In terms of getting out of London, I'm from the more southern part of the island. So I'm from Cornwall, which is basically like on the little foot at the end. It's probably the way you describe it, although I think my finger, there we go, there's my finger. So right down here is where I'm from, and if you can get down there, you can get a train directly down. It's around about 5 hours from London if you're flying into London, or you can get a flight down to Newquay as well. But if you could get down to somewhere like Penzance, so if you think of the Pirates of Penzance, that's where it's kind of set. The West Penwith area of Cornwall is probably one of the prettiest places, on par, I would say, with Fort William in Scotland. In terms of natural beauty and being able to go around and looking at things like prehistoric sites and stuff like that. So standing stones and houses that are literally just like turf and brick and things like that from like the 5th, 6th century, and even going back further to minus 5th and 6th century. So that's probably my favourite part of the country is West Penwith in Cornwall.
Okay, all right. Gareth, what would you recommend?
Wow. Yeah. I'm from the very, very centre of England. So for me, my experience is different from London. One tip for London, I always recommend, if it's your first time there, by all means travel on the tube. But when you get your Oyster card, which is basically your transport pass for London, go on the buses, because you're going to be seeing sites you're not going to see when you're on the tube. So get on a bus. It's still going to take roughly the same amount of time, rather than just seeing a dark tunnel. Get a bus in London, but once you venture out, which is relatively easy to do with public transport, trains out of London go in every type of direction. For me, there's one every half an hour to London. Just get out and explore the actual country. For example, where I live, there's a church 8 miles down the road. That's a Saxon church. It was built in the year 700 and something, which I've still not been to yet. But like Karen gets very upset with me. I live 2 hours away from Stonehenge and I've never been. Again, that's all very, very easy to get to via if you're driving a car. And get out and see Wales. Wales is a beautiful country. If you can get up and go to Scotland, it's an hour flight out of central London to go there. Gorgeous countryside up there. And even go to the continent. You can be in central London, go to St Pancras train station, which is next door to King's Cross, from that book about a lad with glasses and a stick. And you can get on a train, and within an hour and a half, you're in central France. You can do that and then come back. You can do it for a day or two. You can get to Brussels. You can go to Amsterdam on a train for less than £100. So definitely take advantage of our public transport. I'd say do them.
And just to pile very quickly, just to pile on to what Gareth was saying about the buses, I know here in Atlanta there's the reputation that our bus system is not particularly good and not particularly safe. In London, the buses are incredibly safe. They're very reliable. Definitely worth doing.
Awesome. Trisha, what do you recommend?
So as the American of the group who's only gone there for tourist reasons, when we went to, so for London specifically, one of the things that I will absolutely recommend is after we went to go see the changing of the guard, as you do, we wandered up along Buckingham Palace, and there was this little sign for the Queen's private art collection, and that changes regularly. And like it's this tiny sign. You can walk right by it, especially if you're heading towards the stables, because I'm a crazy horse girl. I had to go check out the stables and the royal horses. But they had a private collection of all Da Vinci's anatomy drawings. And you're getting like
Wow.
as close as I am to my tablet looking at you at these original Da Vinci art pieces, like his sketches and everything. And it was mostly empty. So after the changing of the guard, it took like about an hour of us to mingle around, and then it was open. So we went in. Next to no one was there. You're not crushed. You're not rushed. And it changes. So take the time to see whatever they have open for the Queen's private art collection. Super easy to go to. And if you like horses, go check out the stables. My wonderful husband was extremely bored at that. So if you're not into horses, skip it. And then from there, you can just like walk through the park and wander around and find all sorts of stuff. I'm a big fan of wandering and randomly looking for places. In Scotland, which is where we spent even more time, I do highly recommend Traquair, which you can go visit as a day thing, and they often have daytime like fairs and things like that. And I also highly recommend heading out to Islay, because even if you're not a Scotch drinker and you're not interested in the 14 amazing distilleries there, they also have some of the oldest standing stones in Scotland, and they have the seat of the lairds if you're really interested in Scottish history, which Finlaggan, and that's in between the distilleries of Laphroaig and I forgot which one, but it's near Laphroaig because that's where we had gone first. And you just wander around, and again, there's next to nobody there. So you have some space. So even like in the future when we get to travel and we still have to social distance, awesome place to go. They have this hidden bridge under the water that you get to where they would have the meeting of the lairds. They also have the woolen mill that makes all of the kilts and designs all of the Hollywood tartans. So there's all these like little tiny hidden gems on this one little island that you can drive around that has exactly one street light, and that's for the airplanes, and one building with an elevator. So those are some of my definitely check out. And in Coldingham, Scotland, which is on the other side, on the southeastern side, they have Coldingham Abbey, which has been burned down 4 times, but you've got gravestones from the 4th, 5th, and 6th century. And the history there is amazing. Yes, and then you can go hiking. There's a whole nature reserve where all the birds go and breed if you go hiking down there. And then there's this hidden path through, honestly, a sheepfold, and this amazing ancient castle ruins that you get to go to. They tell everyone never go there because it is super dangerous. You're literally walking along the edge of a cliff, but it was totally worth it. So if you're also an adventuring kind of person, take some time to find the local hikes and make sure you have the GPS phone, because you don't get directions how to go there, and check some of those out.
Okay, all right. So as far as places to see, one of the coolest things that a lot of people are familiar with are, of course, are shows like, Doctor Who and Spin Us Like Torchwood. And I know that one of the big places to visit is Cardiff when you do go, if you are a Torchwood fan, and get to see where filming occurs, especially different locations. So what are some places that are, besides, visiting Cardiff, that, you should go here and see this because this was made here, as far as those are concerned? So let's start with Gareth. What do you suggestions?
If you get to go to Stonehenge, probably if you go on like a touristy bus, you won't be able to get to this other place, but if you go in a car, you will. About a 20 to 30 minute drive from Stonehenge is where they filmed Downton Abbey, so that big hall place, so that's relatively quite close. You can go and do that. Some of the Harry Potter sets are actually old either churches or cathedrals or public places where you can go and have a look around. Trying to think where else. What other shows people would like? Because a lot of it is either shot in Wales or London. There's some things up in Manchester, but a lot of those are either studio shows or nothing that you were like, oh my god, this is where they filmed Cracker, for example, or Prime Suspect. They're just nondescript. But yeah, Downton Abbey is very close to Stonehenge. I don't know other things people would want to go and see.
Okay.
What are things people are fans of?
All right. Adam, what would you suggest?
I mean, a big place would probably be Bristol as well, because Bristol's a major sort of media hub. So the last season of Peter Capaldi's Doctor Who, all of the university scenes were filmed pretty much at the University of Bristol. Also, Being Human. I don't know whether you remember that show or not. A lot of that was filmed in the Bristol, Cardiff area. So that would be a place to go. It was also had a very vibrant music scene there back in the day. It's where Tricky got his start, and also bands like Portishead. So Bristol would be a place I'd recommend. More obscurely, there's very interesting industrial heritage sites like Trafry Viaduct, which was actually in the Omen 3. And it's a viaduct that's actually got, it's a bridge, but it's actually got water running through it. It was an experiment. That's a pretty cool place to go to. Besides the usual places like London and, I guess now places like Cardiff, probably maybe parts of Scotland like Edinburgh as well, because it's such a beautiful city that's had a lot of media stuff done there as well. So Edinburgh would be the other one.
Okay. All right. Anthony, what would you suggest?
So I mean, the super obvious one is going to be go and do the Harry Potter studio tour. It's just outside of London in Watford. You can get on the train from almost all over London and get there. It's pretty easy. Takes about 4 or 5 hours to get round. Fascinating, definitely worth doing. Again, London, a lot of stuff is filmed in London. Just go online, whatever show you like. You can probably find some sets and so on. Equally, going back to Adam's homeland, Cornwall, if you're a fan of shows like Doc Martin, that is filmed in and around a certain town in Cornwall, and Adam can probably tell me exactly which one.
Port Elliot.
Port Elliot. Beautiful, beautiful scenery, well worth going to. But yeah, a lot of production, as has already been said, going on in South Wales these days, around Cardiff and Swansea and everything in between, really. Bristol, over in the border in England, all the way west to probably as far as Clonethley or Carmarthen. Lots of things to see. Just whatever show you like, go on Google, type in Doctor Who locations, and you can see exactly where it's filmed and go and find the exact street and get your photo there.
Yeah, and then the new Doctor Who experience is coming to London too. With I don't know if you've seen the ads for it. It's coming out in 2021, and it looks pretty good. It's they've been releasing videos on YouTube for it. It's called Time Fracture, and it's an immersive theatrical experience. So if anyone's ever been to DC and gone to the Spy Museum in DC, which is where you actually get to be a spy and go through and tour all this spy-related paraphernalia, it's going to be very similar to that for the Doctor Who experience called Time Fracture. That's going to be in London. It's opening up in 2021. Apparently, it's got so much buzz around it that they're honestly already selling tickets, which is just crazy because we don't know, what life's going to look like, but it looks really cool as far as like something to do when you're there. I know it's something that I want to do and experience, absolutely. But Trisha, where would you recommend as far as like TV shows and places and going and seeing stuff?
So I just enjoyed walking up and down the Thames and, seeing the Eye of the World, because that's in pretty much everything that has a London sky shot there, and seeing, Big Ben and all of that. And we just wandering around London and like, oh wait, that was from this, because there's random little things that you barely get to see, but here and there. Also, there's a lot from, we were big fans of Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. So we went to, Islington and all those places that showed up in Neverwhere. I know that there has been stuff filmed at Traquair House. I don't remember what off the top of my head. And I know the cliffs around Coldingham and Eyemouth have all been used for screenshots for, like, you know, shots in a variety of shows. They have lists of what shows and where they when they are shot and where you can find them. But those would be the ones that I most remember. And I know there's been a lot of shots in the Glasgow necropolis. So if you check out the Glasgow necropolis, amazing and gorgeous. A lot of the cemetery and necropolis shots that are said to be from different parts of the UK are actually all just the Glasgow necropolis. And they actually do have a Doctor Who booth right outside one of the entrances.
Wow.
It's the blue police box still there. And my husband and I just like squeed in glee and had to go take pictures, of course.
That's awesome. Gareth, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it was with Edinburgh is again another 30-minute drive outside of Edinburgh. If you go down the east coast, is where they actually shot New Asgard in Avengers Endgame. So you get to go and see that tiny little fishing village. And there's actually, I've not been yet, but I've had a look, and there is a big sign up saying "Twinned with New Asgard" outside the village.
That's
so
outstanding.
That's what, if you're in Edinburgh and you're going to be driving around Scotland anyway, just nip down, have a look, and say you've been there.
Absolutely. So those all sound like really awesome, exciting places to go see and visit. Now, one of the things when you travel somewhere is to eat the local food, and it is, you know, they have some of the best things, honestly, in my opinion, as far as things you can get here and things you can't necessarily get here. It's really hard to find. Like one of my favorites is Walker's ketchup chips crisps, and you know. But as far as eating local, whatever meal, is what is the thing that you recommend? You have to do this. It's the thing that you do when you are in this location, be it, you know, England, Ireland, Scotland, like Wales. Where is it, and what is it that you should chow down on as far as something to eat? So let's start with Anthony. What would you recommend?
Well, the obvious thing is you've got to go get Indian food. You know, Indian food has become the de facto national cuisine of England. If you're in London, most people will tell you to go to Brick Lane. I'm going to tell you, don't go to Brick Lane. It's where all the tourists go. Go to Drummond Street near Euston. That is the place to go and get a curry. If you're in Scotland, obviously you've got to try haggis. If you're in Wales, you've got to try lava bread. You know, every region has its own regional cuisine. And, you know, don't be afraid to experiment. Try some weird and wonderful things. We do have them in the UK.
Okay. All right, Gareth, what do you recommend?
Again, definitely with the Indian food. I live just outside of a city called Leicester, which has a very high expat population. It is also outside of India has the largest Diwali festival in the world. We have just a swathe of amazing Indian, Bangladeshi restaurants there, as well as from all over the world, really, because of the old ex-empire days. You'll find Nigerian restaurants, Jamaican restaurants, all incredible food. My one tip would be, if you're going to go and get fish and chips, don't go to a pub or a chain restaurant and get fish and chips, because you're not getting real, proper fish and chips. Go down the non-touristy street where the locals are to a chip shop or a chippy and get fish and chips from them. It is different. They are cooked differently, and it is the most amazing food. It may look bland to some people, but you can't go wrong with proper chippy fish and chips. Again, Anthony said as well, when you're in Scotland, go and get haggis. You can get haggis in the supermarkets in most countries here. I've got haggis in my fridge right now because it is a lovely food. If you're in Scotland, it will probably be served as haggis, neeps and tassies, which is parsnips, potatoes and haggis. And it is lovely, lovely food as well. go to a Greasy Spoon restaurant and get a full English breakfast, or if you're in Scotland, get a full Scottish breakfast, or if you go to Ireland, get a full Irish breakfast. They're all slightly different, but yeah, it is really great food.
Okay. All right. Adam, what would you recommend?
Okay, so before I recommend, I'm just going to say that if I cut off, it's because my phone is overheating. So
Okay.
like if I do
That
actually
was so
exit,
well
just for
timed.
continuity's sake. But
Okay.
food-wise, what I would recommend is basically Cornish pasties is what I would recommend. And now a pasty is a hand pie. I know what the American version of pasty stroke pasty is meant to be, so it isn't that. But a Cornish pasty is basically potato, onion, rutabaga, as we call it Swede in the UK, and beef skirt all together in a pastry, and it stews inside of it with salt and pepper as a seasoning. So that is the thing that I would recommend, coming from Cornwall, that somebody should try.
That's a great suggestion. Okay, all right, Trisha, what would you recommend?
All right, so everything that everyone's already said, but we have not yet brought up sticky toffee pudding. Oh my goodness, that is like decadent heaven in front of you. And I have not had any American attempt that comes even remotely close to what I had over there. The best sticky toffee pudding I had was actually in Isla, in this tiny little hotel that like maybe had 4 rooms, not too far from the woolen mill. It was just like decadent, doesn't even come close to it. So proper sticky toffee pudding. When I was in Glasgow, I had haggis nachos. Oh my goodness, haggis nachos and a lager. Amazing. Like you wouldn't expect it, but really, really good. Go try it. And again, it was like one of the local pubs that were like, hey, there's a pub, let's go in. And that was their special, was haggis nachos, and one of the best decisions we made. I also, we did splurge and we had high tea in Edinburgh Castle. Totally recommend that. It was delicious and amazing. Loved the full Scottish breakfast. My favorite one was at Request, where they like leave the thing in your room and there's no lie, like 20 choices that you can have. That included like smoked kippers, black sausage, white sausage, toast, Scottish oatmeal. It was just amazing. And then you don't really need to eat at all for the rest of the day. And what was the other unusual thing that we had? Oh, I love the smoked salmon. Smoked salmon over there, anywhere that I had it, was also just better than in the US. So check out like the salmon, all the seafood dishes there, just amazing. Beyond the fish and chips. So, yes.
That's fair.
One other thing I wanted to give a shout out for was go and have a kebab somewhere, bluntly. You know, end of a night out, they're open till like 4 a.m. Make sure you go do that. It's greasy and it's absolute heaven. It's like our Waffle House. You know, you're only ever there at like 2 in the morning.
That's fair. That's completely fair. I know there's something that like I used to get all the time, chippy actually, and it's just like a dinner roll, I guess is what you would call it here in America, and it's just French fries, or you know, in this case like chips.
Chip butty.
Chip butty,
yes,
yeah.
A chip butty where it's just, and I don't know why, but that and brown sauce, because when you sit down in some places there, they have brown sauce, and then they have all sorts of other things, obviously vinegar and things like that. Don't overlook the brown sauce. It's actually really delightful and super good and worth trying wherever you're at. And every place makes it a slightly different because everyone has their own, or if they have the generic brown sauce that you put on whatever it is that you're going to get. But everywhere we went, it was a little different. It was either more tangy or not. And it was just my favorite thing to try every time we would go by somewhere. And there's the chippy, and we would, and I would get one for myself. So I recommend, that's one of my favorite things.
And
yeah, that's a t-shirt right there. Don't overlook the brown sauce. That's
exactly.
I was going anyone listening, watching this in America, you can actually get some of the mass-produced brown sauce. I like HP through Amazon. So get yourself a bottle. It's probably about $7-8, but definitely worth it.
And Leicester cheese.
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Oh yeah, go for it.
I've been told Leicester cheese as well. Red Leicester cheese.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Trisha.
One of the things that we did. Oh, sorry. One of the things that we did is we did do the full of Laphroaig Distillery. So again, this is for your Scotch fans that like the Scotchiest Scotch of all Scotches. They have a half-day tour where they take you on a picnic and you walk around like their water. So it's a hiking, and they take you to their water source. And as a picnic, they bring you this delicious barley soup, also made with Scotch, a Scotch tablet, which is like in the U.S., it's similar to maple candy in consistency, but it's Scotch and sugar. It's amazing. We had Scotch cheese sandwiches and cookies. It was just, I would highly recommend if you have, it was absolutely worth what we paid for it, but the full tour of Laphroaig that includes the picnic lunch, because you'll get a bunch of stuff you won't ever get anywhere else.
Yeah, and like you were saying, like cheese, right? Like Adam was mentioning, is definitely worth the experience as far as like a thing that you should try when you're there. I know anytime, like I was there when I was little, and I always thought about the sweets and the chocolates and the candies, and Polo's was a candy that I couldn't get enough of, was Polo, and I don't know why, but they're just little round mints, and they don't taste the same as any other mint that you can find here. They don't taste like Mentos. They don't taste like anything else, but they're delightful. And also Arrow. I ate so many Arrow bars. So if you're ever in, like, if you're in the Atlanta area and you go into a Publix, they have some of them have like a little section of international foods will have different British foods, and you usually have an Arrow bar, and they are just delightful. The mint ones are my favorite. They're super good.
On the subject of sweets and chocolates, I'm going to give a shout out to Cadbury's Crunchy Bars. They are phenomenal. I mean, I think over here they call the middle piece the honeycomb, but just it's perfection in a chocolate bar.
Yeah. Bitty's hobnobs. Bitty's hobnobs and digestives. That's my shout out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I just can't get it. I just love anything I could grab and go with. That's like Walkers, like a bag of Walkers of any kind. It's really, really, really good. And they have the best odd flavor. Like I said, ketchup chips sound disgusting, but they're delightful.
I'm all about the Worcestershire sauce flavor and the roast chicken flavors of Walkers.
Right. Onion and cheese is actually pretty good too. Go ahead.
I was say, if you ever get a bag of Walkers, just make yourself a crisp sandwich. So I personally like getting my crisps, smashing them up, and then pouring them in the bread and then eating them. Some people just are weird and then just put them flat in. But yeah, crisp sandwich is fantastic.
And a brand that's really good that you can actually find in some world marketplaces, stores, is Burt's. Burt's is a Devonshire crisp maker. And they do some really good ones. Really, really good ones.
That's good to know. I like anything snacky. I end up like filling my suitcase full and then, trying to make it through customs.
Absolutely.
But I mean, these are quintessential things when you go to visit. It's definitely the food. You have to try the food. Well, Adam did say we might lose him at some point, and that's unfortunate. We'll have to plug him at the end of the panel. But one final closing tip that you want to leave people with, I know for me, my one thing is to know that a lot of public restrooms there, like, bring some change with you, because you're going to have to, pay to get in to the restroom. If you go in and you eat somewhere, obviously you can use the bathroom, but if you're out on it, like walking around, there are public restrooms, but you do have to pay to use them. And just be mindful of something like that. So always make sure that when you land, that you go to get the right exchange and get your money traded out, and just be aware of that. Also, that your cell phone will not work if you're traveling from the UK over, if you're traveling from the United States over. So make sure you're aware of that. Your options are from your provider, and how you can get a temporary number and do all of that in order to be in contact with people, back home. So let's start off with Anthony. What is one final tip that you want to leave our audience with?
All right, so there's a tendency I've noticed amongst a lot of people from the US who go to the UK to think, I can do London in a day, or I can do the entire country in a day and then go on to Berlin or Rome. No, take some time, do England, do Scotland, do Ireland, do Wales, whatever, but take a week or two. Don't try and cram a day of London and think you've done the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Go and do things properly and get out of London. I know I'm a Londoner and my thoughts tend to be fairly London centric, but there's so much out there outside of London in the UK. I know Trisha's talked a lot about Scotland, but go to Edinburgh, go to the various other parts of Scotland, go to Leicester, as Gareth talks about, go to Cornwall, as Adam talks about. There's a lot of good stuff, a lot of really cool stuff to see in the UK. It's not all in London, and you can't do it in a day.
Okay, that's totally fair. And Trisha, what would you final tip about going there?
Let's see. I know one thing I wanted to say, some cell phones do now let you buy a plan for a week or 2 weeks, because I was able to do that. I have Verizon specifically, so it might be based on carrier. But make sure you do that in plenty of time, and make sure that you turn it off when you get back, or you're going to be very surprised at your price. I would also say my final tip is save room in your suitcase for extra comfy shoes. You do a lot of walking. Make sure you have your support, the most supportive, because all the cobblestones that you're going to walk over and all of the uneven ground is really, really painful after a while if you're not wearing good shoes. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, if you have any special needs, a lot of the hotels, the sites are not accessible. So I didn't realize some of that. I mean, fortunately, my husband and I are fairly fit, but there's a lot of places that don't have elevators, that don't have ramps. We had to lug our heavy suitcases up 3 floors for one of the places we were staying. So one thing to take some time and research, if you have any special needs or any physical needs, see if the particular things you want to visit have either helpers that will work with you, because some of them do, or if how accessible they are, because you don't want to plan to go do a particular thing and then find out that it's not accessible. Same with hotels or anywhere you're staying. Check, see if you have any special needs. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right, Gareth, what's your final tip?
I have 2.
Okay.
Number 1, our electrical plug sockets have on and off switches, which not a lot of people are 100% that they know these things, and can make a difference of when you want to charge your device at night. If you don't switch it down, so you see a little red thing on top of the switch, it's not going to charge. That might save you 1 day's worth of inconvenience. The second thing is, as we were talking about Scotland quite a lot, our money. It's the same currency in all the countries, whereas, for example, and all the notes come in denominations of 5, 10, 20. You can get 50s. Some shops won't accept 50s because they think they're going to be fake, whatever. But if you go to Scotland and you get cash in Scotland, you will not get an English £5 note. You'll get a Scottish £5 note. To the exact same money, it's just different notes. But if you bring a Scottish note back down to England, some shops will look at you funny and may not accept them. But you can just go to a bank and they'll swap them out for English notes because it's the same currency. But some people in England are funny about taking Scottish or even Northern Irish notes. The coins are all the same, just the notes.
Oh wow. And I know that with the notes too, like you can't really tear them, right? Like that's
No, so that's a 5, and I literally cannot tear the notes. And they can go in the wash. You can get them wet. They're just because I think Canada has polymer notes as well. So yeah, and they have a little funky. You can see through them.
that's
There's the
pretty
Queen.
cool.
Oh, Churchill's on the 5er. Jane Austen is on the 10er. And who's that guy? Oh, and JWM Turner, the painter, is on the 20.
Pretty cool. Well, that's all super great information. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry that we lost Adam, but you can find Adam at Remotely Interested Podcast, which is, a great place to check out. Thank you so much, Trisha, for being with us. You can find Trisha at anovelfriend.com and check out all of her awesome poetry as well as some stuff that she's written. And thank you so much, Gareth, for being here. You can check out Gareth's YouTube channel, Let's Go, on YouTube, and he's got a few videos up. And then we also have Anthony as well. Thank you so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate your time. And you can check him out at watchers4d.podbean.com with his Doctor Who Watchers of the Fourth Dimension podcast. So thank you again, Dragon Con. You can find the BritTrack on various social media platforms from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube, which is where we'll be streaming all of our stuff over the course of the weekend. So I have a wonderful...
That was my phone.
I hope that you guys have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. So bye, Dragon Con. Have a good one.